I have accidentally played the best class in the War Within and completely changed my mind on what to main. From the spec, rework, hero talents and overall gameplay, Fire Mage has crawled its way into my heart and I legit consider it the most OP spec you can play. I do have to admit, so far it feels a bit clickbaity, so I will come clean with you. Fire Mage being the best is mostly fun to say and not a guarantee. We can go into what best means and what makes a spec OP in WoW, or even why people care and want to know their spec is OP, but that's just boring. Let me say something that we already know though. Fire Mage has been crushing it every expansion at least since BFA. There are ups and downs, sure, but there has never been an expansion where Fire Mage was not a meta spec and overpowered, in some aspects at least. And this has had most to do with the design. There have been situations where Fire Mage did not do the most damage, had the best utility, or survived the best. Yet it still was a meta spec because its design was just so good. Tuning can always happen, and even if they simply nerf the numbers of Fire Mage to a point where it just feels meh to play, Fire will still be unique in what it does, and people will want it in groups for certain things. I also think they won't nerf it that hard considering the amount of effort the devs put into making it a good spec, and how many people actually play it. Trust me, devs never hard nerf specs that are very popular. They tune them, sure, but they won't risk upsetting a lot of happy players. And I bet you are wondering why I'm wearing this headset. It's because I can't get enough of it, man. The Arctis Nova 7 SteelSeries headset is the most comfortable headset I have ever used and the sponsor of today's video. It has the Nova acoustic system, which features high-fidelity drivers for incredible audio quality, all while being wireless. This is perfect for me since in between dungeons with the boys, I hop over to the kitchen to get some coffee, get back to my PC, and nobody knew I was gone. The quality also extends to the AI-powered noise-canceling mic, this right here, which uses the Sonar Clearcast AI algorithms to silence the background noise as I fiddle through the house and even when I already am gaming and smashing my keyboard. And hey, check this out. I'm just going to swap the microphone to the headset one so you know what I'm talking about. Gaming with the boys on VoiceCom has been really fun because now all I hear is like, why am I hearing Flame so much better than all of you other guys? All of the sound quality coupled with the Comfort Max system with a PVD coated steel headband, all adjustable to fit my big head, has been the most comfortable headset I have ever used, and I have had problems with headsets for a very long time, getting sore ears with every single pair I have used up until today. But with the Arctis Nova, it's just like having your ears licked by an angel. Plus, the 38-hour battery life with USB Type-C fast charging makes this incredible for on and off gaming sessions, since it gets 6 hours of battery life just from about 15 minutes of charge time. I cannot recommend this headset enough for anyone who wants to enjoy proper audio quality when gaming and the power of wireless communication with a team while doing dungeons, no stringy cable needed. To get your pair of Arctis Nova 7 SteelSeries headset, check the link below and use the code Marcelian to get 10% off. Thanks SteelSeries for sponsoring this video. Choosing a main is always a journey you go through, and it's never 100% clear what to get. We can probably aim for about 98.5% in this video, so let's kick it off with why Fire Mage will be the best spec in the War Within. Possibly. As far as design goes, to be fair with you, whatever makes Fire Mages the best in the next expansion is the same with what makes them good now in Dragonflight. The War Within just amplifies all of it. We can debate this with 1,000 arguments, but what makes a DPS spec meta or OP or whatever you want to call it can be boiled down to 4 things: damage, survivability, utility, and synergy. First of all, right now it's actually doing a lot of damage. The footage you are looking at is from me fiddling with the spec. I'm not the best Fire Mage, so you won't see the best the spec can do. And even with that, I was able to hold my own against Warlocks and Red Paladins, which are consistently crushing on beta at the moment. The raid testing and some high key logs kinda show Fire Mage dominating, so at least we know it can slap. Damage is important insofar as stuff needs to die. There are 3 kinds of damage with that argument in mind. Not enough to kill shit, enough to kill shit, and enough to ignore or bypass mechanics, with the latter being what we call broken and why can Blizzard balance classes ever type damage. Mage has at least enough to kill shit, and sometimes to bypass mechanics based on the build that you take. I'm mostly talking about the Ignite style builds, where you take the most dangerous mob in the pack and use all of your damage to nuke it down. The reason this is so good is that usually those mobs are the most dangerous and end up doing group wipe mechanics like, I don't know, casting a big uninterruptible spell that puts the healer's heart rate into triathlon levels of danger. Fire Mage isn't the only one that can do this, but it's probably still the only spec that can do full single target damage to a target and still cleave more AoE than a lot of other specs. You can achieve this with new talents like Ashen Feather that buffs an ability you already use to do AoE damage to do even higher single target damage. This is just to prove a point. This usually happens in difficult content like high keys or when you are all starting under geared, but that's also the content where this matters as well. This might not give you the most overall DPS, but it will clear the Mythic Plus. Similarly for raids, and actually Fire hasn't been amazing for raids, not as much as it has been for dungeons, although that might change with the next expansion. However, it does have an incredible execute damage profile, even if its overall performance isn't that great. When it matters, it is the best though, and the execute damage will be even more significant with talents like Molten Fury, that simply just buffs your overall execute damage and all the changes to Scorch. First of all, baseline Scorch has the guaranteed crit on execute targets baked into its baseline function, which saves you a talent point. You can still get improved Scorch, or you can get down in flames to simply buff Scorch's damage in execute. And if you do, you can also get Heat Simmer that will give you that execute damage buff even as an instant proc. All of these are options, of course. We don't know what the builds will be yet, but it's safe to assume that Fire Mage's desired execute damage profile will be even better in the War Within. For survivability, we are no strangers to the fact that Mage is one of the tankiest specs in the game. War Within ups that tankiness with new hero talents from both Frostfire and Sunfury. Frostfire gives you options such as Imbued Warding versus Meltdown. Warding makes your Blazing Barrier also put a 25% strength Ice Barrier on you to further up the Absorb. Meltdown, on the other hand, makes the end of your Ice Block or Ice Cold put a Blazing Barrier on you. Sunfury also gives you merely a setback, with Blazing Barrier putting 5% avoidance on while the shield lasts and 5% leech for 5 seconds when it gets consumed or expires. Although not new to War Within, it is still relevant enough to mention energized barriers, where casting your barrier removes snares. There are always a bunch of slows that come with an added debuff that fucks with your life, and too often I have found myself forgetting this fact. On top of this, there are multiple new and old talent options in the class tree that will make you harder to kill, and as opposed to other specs that are not OP, you never have to sacrifice damage to get any of these talents. That's pretty OP if you are a warrior or a druid, lol. And as far as utility goes, Frost Nova, Time Warp, Remove Curse, and Mass Barrier are just a few of the reasons Mage is awesome. On top of this, Dragon's Breath as a utility has extra value for Fire Mage as opposed to the other 2 specs. At any point in time, you can decide to take Alexstrasza's Fury and turn it into a legit DPS button you want to use. It won't make it a mandatory rotational press to force you to use it offensively and waste its utility, but it contributes to Hot Streak, and being a guaranteed crit will make it fit nicely into your kit if you do intend to stop a bunch of casts while also progressing your rotation at the same time. Last but not least, the synergy with OP or meta specs has been a big driving factor as to why Fire Mage works well in endgame content. I am talking about power infusion and augmentation buffs, of course. The frequency at which you have access to combustion makes its alignment with power infusion something that needs very little management if your priest decides to have you in its crosshairs. And there's another thing that people don't talk about, and that's still based on your combustion. Most DPS specs that have strong cooldowns would want their tank to play around those cooldowns, or in the case of a raid boss, they want to fire those cooldowns ASAP but sometimes they have to hold them. Since you will end up having combustion on a shorter than 1 minute cooldown likely, you don't have this issue. Not only that, the flexibility of your damage profile being an ignite build or otherwise makes it so you often don't care how many mobs or raid adds you also fight, since no matter what you do, it's a good thing in the end. The added fact that you are not reliant on ground effects with the new talent like Quick Flame replacing Flame Patch, or Living Bomb having no relationship with mob positioning outside their relative proximity to each other, makes stuff like moving bosses or packs not matter to you. And let's not forget about the fact that you can do your entire combustion without having to stop moving. Only Beast Mastery has this level of freedom, and it needs to suffer through pet AI. This level of flexibility that you have makes the spec literally good everywhere, every time, and it's a freedom that no other spec currently has. I don't even like to call Fire Mage OP, broken, meta, or whatever other synonym for this you want to use, because OP received some connotations that people use within a selective context of their choosing, which can oftentimes be misrepresentative. I like to think that Fire Mage is the perfect DPS. It might not end up having the highest damage, although not the case currently. It might not even have the most mobility, the most infinite AoE scaling, or the best pure single target, but no other spec can have all of the above at above average level, sometimes even top meta, all at the same time, with the spec being an actual role-playing game class. Yes, this is the biggest factor and also the fifth unmentioned reason that I appreciate about the spec, and sometimes that players and some devs seem to have forgotten or maybe taken for granted. We are playing an RPG here, so it makes sense for us to pick Fire Mage and build it however we want it and be a good and fun spec to play, which it is. Building upon one or more Fire Mage identities to serve as your playstyle in raids or dungeons or both is something no current spec can do, to my knowledge. You probably won't want to play Flame Strike in single target though, but if you do decide to play Flame Strike in AoE, at least you don't end up shooting yourself in the foot on bosses because there is no single target identity in your build. And let's not forget that simply opening your talent tree, reading the tooltips, and deciding on what you want is something that other specs need a guide to even understand what they need to pick. It might not be the easiest spec to play, and to do rank 1 DPS you will likely still need a smarter mage than me to tell you what to pick. But by God, as a turbo bad fire mage myself, I have never felt better opening the talents, picking what I think is good, and actually doing good enough damage to give other people a run for their money. I don't know what class you want to classify as the best, but if you're not going to do that for Fire Mage, then no other spec really deserves it in the end.